It was a quiet night in Beason, Illinois, a small, close-knit town where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. The G family had gone about their usual evening routines, settling in for what should have been just another peaceful night. But that illusion of safety was about to be shattered. Just before midnight, chaos erupted inside their home. A single figure moved through the darkness, bringing with them a wave of terror that would forever scar the community. Sounds of struggle filled the air, a desperate fight for survival. And when it was over, the silence that followed was more chilling than anything that had come before. By morning, detectives were met with a scene they would never forget. But amidst the horror, there was one tiny spark of hope, a lone survivor who could hold the key to unraveling the mystery. What happened that night in Beason? And what drove someone to commit such a brutal act? In the quiet town of Beason, life moved at a peaceful pace. With a population of around 200, Beason seemed almost forgotten amidst the surrounding farmland and gently rolling hills. Two local families, the G family and the Constant family, were at the heart of this story, sharing life in Beason during the late 1990s. Raymond G. was a hard-working man with a tenacious spirit. He started his career in construction, working under his stepfather's company in Lincoln, Illinois, the nearest town equipped with basic necessities, from schools and restaurants to a small airport. Raymond's stepdad and his mom lived there as well, providing a touchstone for the family. Raymond's dedication to his craft allowed him to save enough to eventually buy a small property on the outskirts of Beason. With a ranch-style home, a two-car garage, and a sprawling yard, Raymond was finally able to establish his own business, G Construction. To help offset the costs of running a business, Raymond decided to rent out a room, which brought Ruth Constant G into his life. Ruth, along with her young children, 3-year-old Justina and 1-year-old Dylan, moved into Raymond's home as tenants. Soon enough, a bond grew between Raymond and Ruth, and their initial friendship evolved into a romantic relationship. Known for her warm personality and sense of humor, Ruth complemented Raymond perfectly. Their relationship blossomed, and in 1997 they tied the knot. Their family grew to include 2 more children, Austin and, a year later, a daughter named Jessica. However, life took a challenging turn when they discovered that Jessica had a severe neurological condition. The lack of specialized facilities in Beason meant Jessica's care needs couldn't be met locally. The family was faced with the heart-wrenching decision to place her in care 50 miles away in Peoria, Illinois, where she was made a temporary ward of the state. Tragically, Jessica passed away before further tragedy struck the family. Meanwhile, Raymond and Ruth faced additional challenges with Dylan, who had boundless energy and was frequently reported for behavioral issues. After seeking help, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and while therapy offered some improvement, it didn't entirely resolve his struggles. During this period, Raymond's daughter from a previous relationship, Nicole, turned 18 and began dating Christopher Harris, a 21-year-old local. The young couple soon married, eventually moving close to Raymond's home, and welcomed their first child, Alyssa Harris. Overjoyed, Raymond and Ruth embraced their roles as grandparents, often watching Alyssa when Nicole and Chris were at work. In the summer of 2009, Nicole and Chris had their second child. With a growing family, Adam Kohler and Nicole's grandfather William Pudge Kohler decided to help Nicole with home improvements, laying new carpet in her house that September. The following day, a local boy, 10-year-old, visited Raymond's house to show off his new bike. But as he approached the porch, he noticed blood smeared across it and the door ajar. Terrified, he ran to Nicole's nearby home. Alarmed, Adam and Pudge, who were at Nicole's house, quickly made their way back to Raymond's house. As Adam stepped onto the porch, he saw a knife lying at the bottom of the steps. Summoning his courage, he entered the house and turned on the hallway light, only to be confronted by an image that would stay with him forever. Raymond lay face down in a pool of blood. Shaken, Adam ran back to Pudge, urging him to call 911. When authorities arrived, they entered a scene of unimaginable horror. Blood spattered the hallway, and Raymond's body bore signs of a brutal attack. Moving deeper into the house, officers found evidence of intense violence, with walls damaged and belongings overturned. The chilling discovery of 14-year-old Dylan's lifeless body outside the main bedroom left investigators piecing together the events of that tragic day. Dylan's head and body were brutally injured. Blood was splattered so extensively it reached the ceiling, casting an eerie shadow over the scene as officers cautiously moved through the house. The police continued their search, which led them to the main bedroom, where they found Ruth lying on the floor, dressed in her nightgown. The trauma she had suffered was overwhelming. Her skull was partially collapsed, and the walls around her bore heavy bloodstains. As they continued into the adjoining bathroom, the officers made another heartbreaking discovery. 11-year-old Austin, clad only in underwear, lay face down on the bloody tiles. From the condition of the scene, it seemed the family had been completely unprepared for the violence that had unfolded, likely attacked as they prepared for bed the previous night. Uncertain whether the assailant was still hiding in the house, the officers moved carefully down the blood-streaked hallway, passing by Dylan's lifeless body and making their way to 16-year-old Justina's room. What they found there was even more disturbing. Justina's room was soaked in blood. Every surface bore signs of the violence she had endured. Her body lay on the bed, head hanging over the side with a puddle of brain matter below. She had suffered the worst injuries of all, with clear evidence of extreme brutality. But just when the officers thought they had seen the worst, they found one last heartbreaking scene. In a darkened closet, they discovered the tiny form of a 3-year-old girl lying crumpled on the floor, blood covering her, and with a wound where her skin had peeled back above her ear. The sight struck the officers deeply. Though hardened professionals, they weren't prepared for such gruesome scenes, especially one involving a child so young. Amid this despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. One of the officers noticed the little girl was still alive. Quickly, a paramedic carried her out to an ambulance, rushing her toward emergency care. Soon, Nicole's husband Chris arrived at the G family's home, summoned from work after the tragic news broke. When he arrived, officers confirmed the tragic reality. His family had been murdered, leaving behind a heavy atmosphere of grief. Yet, they shared one piece of good news. The young girl, Tabitha, had survived. For those gathered, her survival felt like a tiny victory amidst the overwhelming loss. But Chris's reaction was less of relief and more of nervousness. Without a word, he hurried back to his truck, driving rapidly toward the trauma center where Tabitha was being treated. Back at the crime scene, the police began examining the house for any clues. They found a bloody handprint on the bathroom vanity where Austin had been discovered, and a fresh shoe print outside, identified as coming from a Swiss tennis shoe. The officers went through the small community, gathering tips and interviewing neighbors. One witness reported seeing a silver pickup truck with tall exhaust pipes driving by around the time of the murders, a potential lead that the police would explore. The autopsies revealed the true extent of the brutality. Each family member had suffered severe blunt force trauma rather than gunshot wounds, as initially suspected. Raymond G., the father, had sustained 39 distinct injuries, 13 of which were to his head. Ruth's body showed 28 injuries across her body, and her skull had been crushed. Austin had at least 21 blows to his skull, and indications showed he had been pushed against hard surfaces, with signs that his feet had been stomped on. Dylan bore over 100 injuries and at least 52 blunt force impacts, while Justina suffered extensive head trauma, with part of her skull missing. Tabitha, though alive, was fighting a difficult battle. She had multiple skull fractures and severe brain swelling, and the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize her. Despite the nightmarish situation, her survival brought a glimmer of hope amidst the tragic loss of the G family, leaving investigators with a critical witness who might hold the key to solving the case. Tabitha lay in the hospital, unable to speak or see due to severe facial swelling. Despite this, there was a glimmer of hope. She could still move her arm, showing that she had some strength left. To aid her recovery, doctors made the difficult choice to remove a few small sections of her skull to alleviate the pressure from the swelling, hoping it would allow her brain to heal more effectively. It was a frightening situation, but the medical team was dedicated to saving her life. Nicole stayed by Tabitha's side throughout her hospital stay, enduring the tense atmosphere, with police officers stationed close by. Authorities were taking no chances, knowing that Tabitha was the only survivor of the terrible tragedy, and they feared the perpetrator might attempt to harm her again. This constant police presence underscored the importance of keeping her safe, and Nicole cooperated fully, sharing any information she could about her family and the events leading up to the incident. During this difficult time, Chris was a source of support for Nicole, spending long hours with her as she navigated the shock and confusion. Their relationship had its rocky moments, marked by multiple breakups, but they had recently reconciled earlier in 2009. However, tensions remained under the surface, especially as the investigation intensified. Days went by, and the police were left without any solid leads. They had examined every clue, from the suspicious vehicle sighting to the distinctive shoe prints, but still had no suspects. The G family was well liked, known for their kindness and generosity, and no one in the community had any grievances against them. In response to the uncertainty, the police advised the townsfolk to be vigilant, encouraging them to lock their doors at night, check on their neighbors, and stay alert. As the days passed, the community gathered to mourn the loss of the G family at a funeral held on the 28th of that month. It was a somber day, filled with grief and an undercurrent of fear, as everyone knew the killer remained at large. Tabitha was still clinging to life in the hospital, her fight for survival a source of both hope and sorrow for those who knew her. Then, in a twist of fate, a major break in the case occurred at the very hospital where Tabitha was being treated. After finishing his shift guarding Tabitha, one officer shared an elevator ride with Chris Harris, who had just visited her room. The officer happened to look down and noticed Chris's shoes. They were K-Swiss sneakers with a distinctive tread, similar to the print found at the crime scene. He immediately informed detectives, and Chris was brought in for questioning. The police compared the tread of Chris's shoes to the print found at the scene, but discovered they were slightly too large, just a half size off. Despite this, detectives sensed something was amiss, prompting them to proceed with fingerprint analysis. To support Chris's innocence, his brother, Jason Harris, provided an alibi, claiming they had both been away from Beason on the night of the murders. Nicole, infuriated by the suggestion that Chris might be involved, defended him passionately on her MySpace page, posting an emotional message in his defense. "This whole situation is such a mess and so unfair," she wrote. While in custody, the police photographed Chris's body and found no visible injuries, aside from a blister on the palm of his right hand. Meanwhile, investigators searching near Jason's house discovered a tire iron by a creek, a potential clue linking back to the crime. On October 2nd, police seized Chris's truck, which was registered to Jennifer, Jason's girlfriend. Both Jennifer and her mother, Sarah, had previously offered alibis for Chris and Jason, claiming they had been with them on the night of the murders. However, as the investigation progressed, these alibis unraveled, ultimately leading to Jennifer and Sarah's arrest for obstruction of justice. The investigation took a dark turn as detectives managed to discredit the alibis given for Chris and Jason. A critical breakthrough came when police identified Chris's palm print at the crime scene, linking him to the tragic events. Additionally, a woman named Lori Cole, an armed security guard, approached investigators with an unsettling story. Lori recalled that on the night of the murders, around 11:35 p.m., both Chris and Jason had come to her door, inviting her to party. She declined, explaining she needed to rest for work, but she noticed their Ford Ranger parked outside, similar to the truck she'd seen earlier that evening. Although she turned them away, their behavior had made her uneasy. They appeared to have already been partying and seemed reluctant to end the night. Another key witness, Christy Moore, came forward as well. Christy, who admitted to an on-again, off-again relationship with Chris, said he had called her late that Sunday night. He seemed eager to meet, but she was busy with her children. She agreed to see him after they went to school the next morning. Chris arrived at her home in Clinton, just a 15-minute drive from Beason, roughly 12 hours after the murders. Christy noted that Chris acted completely normal, even posing for selfies with her. In the photos, they were affectionate, smiling, and kissing. Christy also mentioned that Chris showed no visible injuries or unusual behavior, though she hadn't seen him in months, likely because of the recent birth of his child with Nicole. Throughout the investigation, Chris maintained his innocence, denying any role in the murders. However, when confronted with fingerprint evidence, he invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and hired a lawyer. It seemed he was prepared to let the legal process unfold. But as pressure mounted, his brother Jason faced a dilemma. Originally charged with obstruction of justice, Jason's charges were escalated to 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, the same as Chris's charges. With the threat of a life sentence looming, Jason faced a critical choice: remain silent to protect his brother or reveal the truth to save himself. Ultimately, Jason began to talk, painting a disturbing picture of that night. According to him, it began with a heavy night of drinking and drug use. Under the influence, he and Chris wanted female company and tried reaching out to former girlfriends, who both turned them down. Jason recounted that they first attempted to visit Lori Cole. While Jason waited in the truck, Chris approached Lori's door, but she declined his invitation to hang out. Next, Jason claimed that Chris became fixated on going to the G family home, leading to a chilling sequence of events. Jason's accounts varied, with over a dozen versions told to investigators. Still, one constant in his stories was the assertion that Chris was the one who initiated the violence. According to Jason, Chris had an obsession with Justina G., the 16-year-old daughter of the G family. Convinced that she had been flirting with him, Chris believed Justina was romantically interested. Jason claimed he remained in the truck while Chris approached the G residence, possibly armed with a tire iron, depending on the version. In one telling, Raymond G., the father, answered the door, and a brief confrontation turned deadly, with Chris allegedly retrieving a tire iron from the truck. From his spot in the truck, Jason reported hearing muffled screams and thuds, sounds of a nightmare unfolding inside the house. In a chilling moment, he recalled seeing Dylan dash out of the house, bleeding heavily, with Chris following close behind. Jason saw Chris strike Dylan multiple times with the tire iron before returning inside. Miraculously, Dylan managed to get back to his feet and re-entered the house, where the violence continued. Moments later, Chris emerged, climbed back into the truck, and casually discarded his shoes and the tire iron out the window. A chilling detail in the investigation was a recent complaint of attempted sexual assault involving Chris and Justina, which had been dropped only a week before the murders. Jason suggested that Chris had indeed gone to the G residence with inappropriate intentions, though these motives did not ultimately materialize. Following Jason's testimony, investigators retraced his described path. Along the road, they found the discarded shoes and tire iron. Forensic analysis confirmed that DNA on these items matched both Chris and the G family, sealing the case. On May 31, 2013, a jury found Christopher Harris guilty of the G family murders. On July 19th, he was sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms, along with 30 years for the attempted murder of Tabitha, 30 years for home invasion, and 20 years for robbery. Chris's defense team attempted to argue that he had stumbled upon Dylan committing the murders and had killed Dylan in self-defense. This claim, however, was swiftly dismissed. Just before sentencing in 2013, Chris and his legal team sought a retrial, but the request was denied. In 2019, they appealed, but the appeal was also denied. The story took another twist when a former cellmate of Chris came forward, claiming that Chris had confided in him about the events of that night. According to this cellmate, when Chris arrived at the G home, an argument broke out with Raymond, escalating to violence when Chris struck him with the tire iron. Ruth, hearing the commotion, rushed in, only to become Chris's next victim. During the chaos, Dylan grabbed a kitchen knife to protect his mother but was overpowered by Chris. The cellmate added a disturbing detail. Chris reportedly expressed no remorse, his only regret being that he hadn't burned the house down, believing it would have concealed his involvement. As evidence stacked up, Nicole's stance shifted from defending Chris to condemning him. During the sentencing, Tabitha, now 7, delivered an emotional statement that moved the courtroom. She said, "I am 7, and it still breaks my heart. I wish you were dead, and my brother, sister, mommy, and daddy were alive. You have to say sorry because do you know how badly that broke my heart?" Jason, having testified against Chris, received a reduced 10-year sentence with credit for time served, a decision that sparked debate. Many questioned whether it was fair, given his passive involvement in the brutal acts. He had multiple opportunities to intervene but chose not to, even as Dylan called out for help. Nonetheless, his testimony played a significant role in securing justice for the G family. Jason's girlfriend, Jennifer, and her mother faced probation and fines for concealing evidence. Meanwhile, Tabitha, who had been cared for by state troopers during her hospital stay, formed a close bond with her caregivers. They showered her with attention, painting her nails, reading stories, playing games, and even organizing a birthday celebration to lift her spirits. Despite the numerous surgeries she underwent, Tabitha made a remarkable recovery, with her brain injuries allowing her to forget the traumatic events that took her family. After a period in foster care, Tabitha found a loving home with her sister Nicole. In 2014, the case gained further attention on the show When Murder Comes to Town, which aimed to uncover details of the G family murders. However, the show's portrayal sparked controversy as it leaned toward the defense's narrative, suggesting that Dilla was a troubled teen capable of violence. This characterization infuriated those who had worked on the case. Officers involved released an open letter challenging the show's depiction, emphasizing Dylan's bravery, not just as a victim, but as a heroic young man who tried to protect his family. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.